All right, so we're getting started. We're picking up where we left off yesterday, where we started the topic called borer. Borer is separating the not good from the good, specifically when it comes to food. So we talked about three principles, and we're going to go back to those three principles, and keep expanding and explaining those principles. But basically, it's a problem when you separate the bad from the good using a utensil for a later time. That's like, you do all three of that, it's the worst. You've violated from the Torah. From the Chachamim, if you do any of the three, you've violated. So we have to always be careful when we're separating one food from another, that we take the good from the bad. We don't use a utensil made for sifting or separating, and that when we're doing the sifting and separating, when we're taking the good from the bad, we do it for immediate purpose, for, as we said yesterday, during this meal. Right? All that was discussed yesterday, and now we're going to talk about specific cases that work off of this, because as you're going to see, there's actually a lot of fine details that go into the case. Okay, so let me get into the book and see where we were. Okay, we were here. Okay, we had said that what's the amount that you separate, what's the time frame that you could separate in for that meal, right? So let's say I'm separating, we've been using the cherries and berries, right? So let's say I have a basket of cherries and berries, and I know the people only want to eat the cherries. They don't want to eat the berries. So I separate the cherries out from the berries with my hand or a fork, as we said yesterday, and it's for this meal that's coming up. I can't leave any over for the next meal, because if I do, then it's a problem, right? So when I'm separating, I have to estimate how many are they going to eat in this meal, right? I can't plan to say, let me separate enough cherries for this meal and the next meal. I can't do that. So I have to figure roughly how many cherries are going to be used for this meal. When I say this, I mean roughly, right? You don't have to be precise, right? And if you said, well, I figure there's 20 people, right? And each is going to have 3 cherries. So let me separate 60 cherries, etc. And now all of a sudden 2 people don't eat cherries. You don't have to throw out the cherries. It's nothing, you do a basic estimate. The point is, you don't separate 1,000 cherries, right? Because that's not going to happen in that meal. So you have to be honest with what your system is and how you plan on doing it. But once you're honest about it and you're not trying to load up for later times, then you're okay, even if there's some leftover. Okay. He says, when we talked about good and, we're separating the good and the bad, he says, let's say you have, like we said, strawberries, right? So within the strawberry bucket that you got, let's say you got big ones and little ones, right? And you like the big ones, right? And the little ones, they're not as good, or vice versa, right? So he says on that, you could separate what you want and whatever is easier. So therefore, it's not a problem. So separating of the same type of food is not a big deal. However, we're going to see, what does that mean, same type of food? We're going to have a couple of cases. So he says the next case that he talks about is, he says, let's say you have a plate, right, and you have fruit in it, and some of the fruit is very good, and some of the fruit has gotten rotten, or not as good, overripe or something like that, and you can't tell, right? And now you pick it up and you see, this one is no good, right? And you don't want it because it's not as good. You want the other one that's in the plate. Can you take this and throw it away, right? And the answer is yes, you can. It wasn't your intention. You weren't separating the bad from the good. You were just eating. And the normal way that you eat is you look at it and you see, is this something that I would want? Oh, no? Okay, so then you throw it aside. So that's not a problem, right? It would only be a problem if you looked and you said, some of them are not as good as the others, right? I see those are rotten. Let me take the rotten ones out, right? The way to deal with it, if you saw ahead of time, would be to take the healthy ones out and then eat from there. But if you didn't know and you couldn't see and you couldn't tell, and as you took it out, you see there's something wrong with it, that's fine, not a problem. Okay. What about if you have two different types of fish mixed together? So you have, I don't know, flounder and snapper, or, tuna and salmon, something like that. Those are considered two different types of foods, right? And then you can only take out of it the one that you want to eat now, and you can't take out the one that you don't want to eat. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, so that's about the fish. Okay, he says, and it's even true if you have the same type of fish. He said, and you have the same type of fish, but one is baked and one is fried, one is boiled, or something like that. So the preparation made it different. Same story, right? And it's now considered different types, and you have to be paying attention if you're separating to take out the one that you want, not the one that you don't want. And the same thing applies to meat, is what his next piece is. So if you have boiled meat, fried meat, roasted meat, they're all different, right? Different types of chicken, and so on. Different types of pickles, right? Sometimes within a pickle jar, right? Sometimes you'll see in the pickles, they have the peppers, and then the, I don't know, like they have those, I think the cauliflower, right? The pink cauliflower. And you only like the peppers, or you only like the cauliflowers. You can't take out the one you don't want. You have to take out the one that you do want. Okay. Okay. Any questions up until this point? I know we did a lot and fast. Go ahead, Avi, go.
What is the reasoning that the rabbis made it more stringent? In other words, according to the Torah, it's very easy. Don't use a sifter, and you have no problem, right?
Right.
But the rabbis come and make it more difficult. What is their reasoning for this?
Right. So it's a good question. It's something that we do, I would say quite often. And by the way, when we say it's the rabbis, it's often not the rabbis. It's often the custom, and then the rabbis back that custom and say that's the custom. But either way, whether it was the rabbis who came along and said this, or the people themselves who accustomed themselves in order to do this, and then that's what it became. So like, for example, a classic example of something that the rabbis themselves probably didn't establish, but the people established, was the waiting time between meat and milk. It wasn't like some rabbi came along and said 6 hours. It was much more like there was a custom that the people established. The rabbis saw that that's what the people established, and that became the law. That seems to be the way, if you follow the sources, that seems to be the way that developed. And there's lots of others that fit that way. So regardless, whether it was the rabbis who established it or the people who established it, what's the reasoning behind it? It's pretty clear, right? Which is, if we only disallowed the situation that the Torah disallowed, which is bad from good with a utensil, storing for later, it would be very easy for people to not pay attention to the rule, because they'd be used to taking bad from good as long as you didn't use a strainer, or taking bad from good as long as you didn't do it right away, or even using a strainer as long as you didn't use it right away. So in order to make sure that no one made any mistakes, they said across the board, you have to do it all in the positive way, in order that you not get to the place where you do it in the negative way. So I think that's the answer to the question. Is it excessive? We could argue. I happen to think it's not so excessive once you're doing it, because it would be easy for people, given there's 3 criteria, it would be easy for people, if they knew, oh, you could do one and not the other, it would be easy for them to get lost. So I think that's where it comes from. That's what I think. Okay. Next case. Right. What about taking what about the item itself, right? In other words, sometimes the item itself has good and bad, right? Classic example is an item that has a shell, right? Whether it be an orange or an onion or a banana, right? All of these, right? That item itself has the good, right? The part that you want to eat, and the bad, which is, usually the shell, which you don't want to eat, right? So am I allowed to peel a banana, right? There I'm taking the bad from the good, and I'm taking the peel and throwing from the side. Am I allowed to peel an orange or a grapefruit, right? Am I allowed to scrape off the outer shell of an onion because I don't want to eat that, right? That's a fair question. So he says like this, you're allowed to shell you're allowed to take off the peel of a garlic or an onion in his hand, or even using a knife if you're going to eat it now, since this is the way you normally eat it. But you can't peel it in order to leave it for later, right? I can't say, I'm going to need some onions later this afternoon. Let me peel some onions now. That I can't do. He says, and this is true of all fruits that have a shell, right? And he includes nuts, almonds. Almonds have shells. I don't know if almonds have shells, but that's what he says.
Yes.
Almonds have
Yes.
shells. I guess I'm used to seeing
Yes,
them.
almonds do have shells originally.
I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Alone has it.
What's that?
Alone had it
With
the almond in a hard shell, very hard shell.
Okay, so that would be the rule. You can't shell you could shell the almond now to eat it now. You can't shell the almond later to eat it later. You can't shell the almond now to eat the almond later. Potatoes, grapefruits, and so on. He says you can eat it, you can shell them, provided you're going to shell it now. He says apples, you can even actually shell the apple to eat later, since anyway, taking the shell doesn't do anything, right? In other words, an apple, how do people normally eat the apple? They eat it with the shell on the outside. That's the normal way that people eat the apple. So he says, so if that's the case, taking the peel off the apple is like not even doing anything, and therefore it's fine, and it's not even considered having done anything. He says, and that's true of other items. He says, what would be a classic other item like an apple would be a cucumber, right? Cucumbers, right? People eat them without the shell, but a lot of people eat them with the shell. So therefore, shelling a cucumber may not even be a problem because you could eat it with the shell. Most people eat it with the shell. So therefore, he says it's not a problem. He says you should, if there's a particular machine that's used for shelling an item, says you should not use that shell. He talks about an onion peeler, right? Says you could use a knife, but not the item that's made specifically to peel the onion. But he says that you are allowed to use an egg slicer. I don't know what you call those things, that they have where you take the hard-boiled egg and you push it down and it cuts it into different slices. That there's no problem. You can use that. No big deal. Okay. He says if you're eating a fruit or a vegetable and it's leafy and you don't want to eat that, right? That part of it, right? So for example, a strawberry, right? You're going to eat the strawberry. You want to take off the top of the strawberry. You don't want to eat that. So that would be allowed because it's the normal way that you eat it. And therefore it's not considered border. So that's that. He says, what about you have fish, right? You could get a nice fish, that maybe still has the bones inside of it, right? It hasn't been filleted yet, right? So are you able to take the bones out, or do you have to eat it on the bone? He says you could take the bones out, because that's the normal way that we eat it. First, you take the bones out, and you don't want to get bones stuck in your mouth. It's the normal way that you eat it. He says, however, let's say on the plate, right? There's bones on the plate, but it's not together in the food. So he says, don't be taking the bones out. Take the fish out and eat the fish. Don't take the bones because the bones are stuff that you don't want. So again, if it's in there and you want to get it out of there, if it's connected to the fish and you want to get it out of the fish so you could eat the fish, that's a normal way to do it. But if it's already out of the fish and it's just mixed in, and then you're just trying to eat around things, so take the fish out instead of the bones, because again, we have to always try and take the good from the bad. He says, let's say you're eating chicken, right? And sometimes when you're eating chicken, if the skin is still on the chicken, there will be either a feather, a hair, or something on it that they missed, right? You don't want to eat that. Can you take that off? He says, yes, you could take that off. That's not a problem. It's part of the chicken. It's not considered border. It's no problem. It's almost like dark meat, light meat, not an issue. Okay. Next, he talks about fruit that has a shell on the inside of it, right? What are examples? So he talks about dates, peaches, apricots, and things like that. He says you could take let's say a lot of people like to do this, right? When I eat dates, I like to do this, right? What do? You kind of crack it open a little bit with your hand, and then you pull out the date, and then you eat the rest. Says that's not a problem because, date by date as you're eating it, because that's the normal way that you eat the date is to take the seed out. So if there's a fruit that's the normal way that you do it, then that's fine, and that's the normal way to do it, and it's not a problem. He says, but he gives a different example. He says fruits that have lots of seeds in them, and here he uses raisins. He says you can't take out the pits from them, even if he's holding it in his hands, since in order to take out the pits, you have to do it one after the other. It's like taking the bad from the good. He says rather take the raisin in your mouth, eat it, and then if there's any pits, spit it out. So now you're probably wondering, once I said that, what about watermelon, right? That's the classic example. He says, so seeds of the watermelon. He says you should not take them out of the watermelon before eating them, even if he's going to eat it right away. He says, because this is considered taking out the psolet from the ochel, right? That's considered taking out the thing. He says, rather, what should you do? This is how he says it. I'm going to read it to you straight. He says, take the watermelon piece in your hand, shake it, what he says, and get the seeds out. And the seeds that don't fall out, right? He says, okay, so he says, shake it, right? One second, let's see if the ganim mimena. He says, however, whatever is left in, he says, then you could take it out with your hands, right? But he says, try and do it in a different way. So basically what you can get from this is that the watermelon is like kind of one of these not everyone agrees upon cases, a borderline case, there's differences of opinion. I'm going to say halacha, I don't see shaking a watermelon doing anything, right? I've never, whatever's on the watermelon is on the watermelon, and you're going to sit there shaking a watermelon, I don't see that. So what I would say is, look, if you could brush something off, there's not a problem. But probably to go and nitpick each and every piece in the watermelon, you could know that at least according to some opinions, you shouldn't do that. And the best way to eat the watermelon is to eat the watermelon and then spit the pits into your hand or into the plate or into a napkin or whatever it may be. And that you'll be fine according to all opinions. However, if it truly drives you crazy, so use your hand or a blade, a knife or a fork. There's no utensil for sifting watermelon seeds. I don't see that problem. Since you're eating it now, since it's kind of the way that you eat it anyway, many people eat watermelons that way, so it's less of a problem. And of course, we all know that most watermelons are mostly seedless today, so it's less of a problem than it used to be. In the olden days, you used to get a lot of seeds in the watermelons, and today, I think you find that you get a lot fewer because they're all genetically modified. Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the apple, can you cut around the seeds when you cut it in 4 pieces?
Yeah.
The seeds are in the center.
Yeah. Okay. Next, another one that's a classic case. So hagarinim, apsolat shel milon, mutar lahasiram mimenu kedei lechot miyad, kedei shebadeta yefshar lagia el besaro. So eating like bizit, right? You can't not. There's no way to do it other than to crack the seed. So then, of course, you could crack the seed, throw the seed away. No problem to eat bizit for boner on Shabbat. It's the only way to do it. Same thing with peanuts, right? Peanuts, especially the ones you get at a baseball game, that have the shell, not the ones that come in the jar already shelled. He says if this is the way that you eat it, and it is the only way to eat it, he says you're allowed to crack the peanut shells and then take out the peanuts and eat the peanuts. And he says anyway, since peanuts tend to be cracked a little bit already, it makes it even another reason why it would be lean. Okay. Let's see if I want to do this one. All right. Hasochet limon al salad or al ma'achal v'naflu garinim betoch ha'ma'achal im schitato asur להסיר את הגרעינים ולזורקם החוצה כיוון שזה נחשב שבורר פסול מתוך אוכל שאסור גם לאלתר. He says, ורק אם ימצוץ הגרעינים תחילה יחיה מותר לו לאחר כך לזורקם. Says, let's say I'm squeezing lemon onto a salad, right? Which we do, right? And then when you squeeze the lemon onto the salad, the seed falls into the salad. He says you can't go and pick out the seed from the salad. Just leave it there and eat around it. He doesn't want you to take out the bad from the good. Okay, and yeah, okay. Chelmon v'chelbon shel betza. He says the white and the yellow of an egg. Yesh machloket b'poskim im nechshavim min echad mutar levror or nechshavim shnei minim v'asur levror. It's a question as to whether or not it's considered one item or not, right? So, like for example, when you eat hard-boiled eggs, right? A lot of people, they either don't like the white or they don't like the yellow or so on, right? So can I take out the, let's say if I like the white and I don't like the yellow, can I take out the yellow and something like that? So he says there's an opinion that says it's allowed, so therefore not a problem. You can do it. He says, let's say you want to clean fruit, right? Right. What are you doing? There's dirt on the fruit. I'm separating the dirt from the fruit, and I'm getting rid of the dirt. He says not a problem because the dirt, number one, is not fruit. It's not considered part of the food, and that's normally the way that we eat it. Okay. If you're drinking a cup of water or something and you want to pour out some of what's on there, right? Like, let's say, I don't know, there's fizz or something like that. You're allowed to separate the foam or something like that. That's not a problem to do either. Okay. Let's stop here on Shabbat. Let's stop here and we'll talk about, tomorrow we'll get into, there's a fly in my soup, and we'll wrap up the other things. Okay.
Rabbi,
yes.
On an egg, can you peel the egg and either take the shell off and eat it later, or you have to do it all at the same time?
I would say you should do it at the same time because that, I mean, you could peel it like before the meal, but you shouldn't peel it in the morning for late in the afternoon.
Okay.
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 All right. Stop here.
Asaka Baruch. Have a great day.
Take care. You too.
Bye, everybody.